Hey guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Harvey Lawton of the Movement Blueprint. We have an awesome discussion around all things sort of rehab, corrective exercise, and training for longevity. I really enjoyed this podcast. So much of what Harvey says is totally in alignment with my philosophy on training and the, in air quotes, rehab process, moving everything much higher up the spectrum towards full on hard training versus isolated or really low intensity rehab stuff. So stay tuned if you or anyone you know has got any niggles or injuries and want to understand better how to deal with them yourself, or if you're a coach for your clients. But before we get into it, please check out our website, which has recently been updated, lungeandlift.com. We've got loads of good stuff, our recommendations, a free download for the 4 best deadlift accessories that you're currently not doing. And it's constantly getting updated. So please keep checking in on there for all the goodies. As ever, a big thank you to our show sponsor, Wit Fitness. Please check them out at wit-fitness.com and use our discount code LL15 to get 15% off your purchase. And also our BFR blood flow restriction partner, Hydro. Use our discount code LL20 to get 20% off. Right, let's get into the good stuff. Harvey, welcome to the show. How are you, mate?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. And for our listeners who might not know who you are, please could you give us a quick intro as to who you are and what you're up to at the moment?
Yes, so I'm a personal trainer and an online coach. I own a business called the Movement Blueprint, which is an online training platform with multiple arms of the business. So we have a education arm, we have a group training arm, we have a pain to performance, or kind of leaning into the clinical side of injury rehab, that arm as well. And the overriding goal is to solve problems in terms of fitness and training for as many people as we can.
Awesome. And you're good friends with the former show guest, Mr. Tom Bliss.
Yes.
That from your rugby days, is that how you got into fitness? Can you tell us the story there?
Yes. So rugby was kind of something I threw myself into from. I started playing when I was very, very young, and I went full bore into it because I realized that I wasn't really like as good as anything else. So I gave my everything to it up until the age of about 20, 24. Um, Along the way, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that um, it's very fickle. I picked up a few big injuries, which actually I look back now and it completely changed me as a person and it shaped who I am today. Those injuries being bilateral ACL, microfracture on my left knee, MCL on my right knee, grade 2, multiple shoulder dislocations, right
Jeez.
hip labrum issues, and a couple of right side broken ankle. So I went fully into it. I gave it my all. It didn't really work out. I went to university. I was exposed to a good amount of training and rugby in a high performance setting. I learned a lot about the injury rehab process along the way. I learned a lot about having to react and get back up from injuries. To paint a bit of a picture, I went down to Exeter University on a pre-season thing where the freshers kind of go down before we went into like a high performance, not a scholarship at all. It was like a route into going down to pre-season. And I blew my right ACL about 2 months before I went down there. So I went down with an identity who I thought I knew I was. Um, and I got it knocked out of me. And I went basically from physio bed to physio bed, played a couple of games here and there, and came out of quote unquote retirement, as a lot of people used to say, for 7 seasons. So it was a really good learning curve, and the whole process of going through university and rehabbing my right ACL, in the end of my second year doing my left ACL after, um, a good 7 seasons, a bit of travel, went to Dubai and all that sort of stuff. It was great. But, essentially I was always chasing something I thought I was from before university, which, when you were playing Colts rugby, you thought you were king, it was great. And it just really knocked me back. And I actually had a lot of self-realization and learned a lot about myself at university, because there was a lot of exposure to great athletes, great players, great coaches. We trained down at Chiefs all the time, and it was in the same circles as the guys down there. So I really tried to flip the narrative and absorb as much information as I could about the process and really understand what it takes to get back from, yes, science and like protocols and that sort of stuff, but more as a self-realization of what's actually important, sports psychology, and kind of flip it from there. And here we go. 2 ACLs later, my left ACL was re-ruptured, and I didn't have surgery on it. And now, touch wood, I'm performing to a level that I'm really proud of and happy with. And I think it's through a lot of guinea pig on myself, a lot of exposure to great people along the way in terms of some fantastic physios who I keep in contact with, one of which who I had a lot of actual kind of education with along the way. And it just led me into a route of, getting my first, I'm probably skipping forward a bit, getting my first role in the fitness industry in London. So I came straight up, still trying to hang on to some rugby, playing at Guildford. So I was, doing a full-time PT job, going down on Tuesday, Thursdays, training, scraping at the barrel, putting myself in a ditch every week and doing it again on a Monday and going again. But that shaped that, and that really sparked an interest of who I was as a coach and who I thought I was as a person. And as I said, that leaned into that kind of clinical setting, clinical side. So after I did my degree and graduated, I always thought I wanted to be in a clinical setting, be it, I had a few friends at university who went into cardiac roles through cardiology and that sort of stuff, like a channel from exercise, sports and exercise science into that. And one worked on Harley Street, down the road from me where I was based in Marylebone. And I went in there, had a couple of interviews, had a couple of great conversations. He's a good mate of mine. He's wearing chinos and a shirt, probably taking home a lot more money than I was back then as a coach. He's just a year older than me. So there's great progression here. We do basic movement orientation, but it's mainly figures. It's mainly like, facts. We take people from here, we give them a process and they get here. And then kind of like bounced around that a little bit, had some work experience. Definitely wasn't work, it was work experience at both the Cardiac Centre on Harley Street and also the Centre for Human Health and Performance, CHHP, which was again more kind of training orientated and injury rehab orientated. And I just, back then as a coach, I just wanted to expose myself to as many really awesome people as I could. I was lucky enough to have great figures in my first role. So I got a job at Third Space, fresh-faced, thought I knew everything, didn't know anything, and really sponged off like three, four key people: a chiropractor, a personal trainer called Will Down and Good Form Training. He's on Instagram. He's over in Canada now, absolutely killing it. And just to really try to align myself with these people that I thought would benefit me, like very selfishly understood that I needed to know more. There's so much more to know, and yeah, I've probably scattered right the way around there, haven't I?
No, it's great, mate. I think it's a common theme for people working in the sort of injury movement corrective space that you've had a really tough time yourself. And I always say it to people that no one really gives a shit about moving well until they've suffered the consequences of moving badly. And why would you? Like, if you can just get away with training hard and doing all the fun stuff, then why would you pay attention to the less sexy bits? But it's only when you've suffered a lot you realize that that's actually the sexy stuff. That's my take on it anyway.
I do also think, when it comes to having that personal experience, like the way you have empathy with the person you're dealing with as well. Like when I was talking to one of my clients, I spoke to her. She just recently had a bit of a knee injury, and I was saying about when I just done my back in a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying like how much I felt like I regressed. But I knew I was like, okay, cool. Today I'm a little bit better than yesterday. Then I'm a little bit better, and it's just how you're approaching it. And I was able to talk to her from such personal experience of so recent that it's just that buy-in, and you're just like, because then when you're saying like this is what we're doing, and then like, oh, I feel like I've gone so far back. It's like you've just taken a sidestep. Don't get me wrong, you've gone backwards, but temporarily you've now got to do what you need to do to start bringing yourself back and become stronger. You'll learn more about yourself.
That's the thing. I think we as coaches especially like to systemize things. We like to understand that there are protocols to follow. But when we've had that exposure ourselves to the cause, we have a deeper level of understanding, not only how it feels like, I've probably had about 18 months of being physically injured from a knee injury, 18 months. And that's 18 months of, I'm a very driven, goal-orientated person. So that's 18 months of me pivoting and thinking, how am I going to get back to where I want to be? And that was, that used to be when I was at university, on a single leg, throwing a tennis ball against the wall. That used to be the driver. The drive was for me to get back doing what I love doing. And that was, playing sport of any sport. I just love sport. I still do. And now the shift has gone to, it went from the whole physio, like hopping and getting back and pushing sleds and that sort of stuff, which was all I knew back then. And then it flipped to, okay, cool. Now there's a way I can implement routine and structure to get the best out of my knees. And that was in a gym setting. So that was me doing 2 sessions a day and, learning how to monitor firsthand, how to create a happy knee, not load an angry knee, knowing how to, or knowing the need to organize my trunk and knowing the need to organize my lower body stability to be able to perform. And you can pick these things up from courses and understand, but when you're in real time thinking, there's a requirement here that I need to create a platform that I can have as much opportunity, then you really dive in. And as you were saying, Rob, then that creates a buy-in, then that creates understanding. And that's why I'm particularly passionate about all things corrective exercise. It's what I've built the movement blueprint on, in the sense that, I think corrective exercise is a hugely misunderstood concept, because, the best corrective exercise is load. We need a stimulus. We need something to create that kind of pathway within the body. And I think that I've actually gone full circle on that as well. And it took a learning process to think, a 12-kilo kettlebell is just not going to cut it.
Love that. And I tell you what, I think it's so important that, as you said, like the fact that you've been there, and also how much you practice what you preach, and I think you get that across on social media really well, from like the energy system stuff that you do, for how hard you push yourself and end yourself, to when you're competing. But then you also see, with obviously you mentioned at the start how the movement blueprint has its group coaching and the performance side, and I've taken part in it myself and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's just a different interpretation of training, but with all the same principles, but just your spin on it. And I think because you're practicing what you preach continually, it's so easy to buy into the movement blueprint's methodology.
Man, that's great to hear. On the energy systems thing, and you guys will appreciate this, and just because of your experience in the game. However, there is so much to be said from doing cardio, especially post-injury. There's been studies done from the Aussie Institute of Sport around ACL reconstructions, and that is like return to previous VO2 max scores decreases the opportunity or the potential to break down again. So that's ACL re-ruptures, ACL re-injuries, and movement quality. So as soon as you're faced with an injury, there are always things that you can do to metabolic challenge your body, to keep everything going on, to manage body composition, to manage strength endurance from global tissues. And these things all feed back into the injury site. The injury site is, yes, it's a problem, but you're going to get the most out of your body if you have that global ethos of I've got a knee injury, but I'm still going to challenge my slings. I'm still going to understand that I can create metabolic adaptations, and I think that makes the whole process a lot smoother. And, I've had people say to me, you train way too much. And I think about it, and I say to them that, or I rationalize it in my head that I've created a routine that has worked for me for 15, 12 to 15 years of a good training age. And that has carried through as a priority. So I fit everything around my job, my relationship, my life, my family, and I try to create that balance. But the overriding goal is that I know that I need to be doing X to get the most out of my body. And now, as you said, Rob, about competing and stuff, the script is completely flipped. Me competing was, I'm not like, you see people competing nowadays and they are properly competing. I was never at that level, but it was a means for me to maintain a competitive outlook and to have an honest conversation with myself after each event, after each new stimulus, that I gave it my all. Like I'm never going to be stronger than the big guys in the functional fitness space. Never. Like my deadlift is probably half yours, Rob. But the thing that I want to compete on is the things that I pride myself on. And that might be adherence. That might be discipline. That might be an FTP test. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there's a huge things that I hold like in myself, that I expect huge things from me on my personal level. And an opportunity to put that into a functional fitness competition is just against me. It's not against matey who can lift far more than me or go through 30 bar facing burpees as an EMOM for 20 minutes. Like, that's not me. I don't that's not me.
But then in the process, you'll qualify for the World High Rocks, right? Didn't you accidentally?
yeah, accidentally. No, that World Championship pilot, that's just work rate. That's just like how
yeah, but mate, I love that. Yeah, oh shit, I'm qualified for Worlds. That's not what I realised. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I think they must have been strapping at the straws, but no. I mean, anything with a ski erg, a row, and a sled in there, I'm sweet.
Well, it's a perfect segue, Harvey, because one of the questions we had for you, and we're going to have for our future guests, is what is fitness to you? Like, how do you train? Why do you train? And if you were to sum it up in a short paragraph, like, what do you think of as fitness?
Great question. So fitness, like, I always think that your body is a story of what you've done previously. So you are the sum of your lifetime right now in this present moment, and everyone now is in this present moment. I think what is fitness to me is having an opportunity to bring out the best in that, and to continually put your best foot forward. I think the narrative has changed in the sense that I used to just push all the time, because I was just searching for that competitive streak that I had from cricket season, from rugby season, and that was all I knew. I wanted to be better, and I think now what fitness is to me is an opportunity to progress bit by bit, and everyone says it's a privilege, because it is a privilege. So I think that's my answer, if that was as clear as mud.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And just to give the listeners a bit of insight, Rob's mentioned it. You mentioned it. You like your big cardio pieces. What's a typical training week like for you? What are the columns?
Yeah. So I will lift 3 times a week, and there will be my version of heavy lifts, and each block I go through, I mimic the Perform program and the Movement Blueprint. So, the KPIs of last block were a trap bar deadlift, a lunge, and a horizontal press. And for me, I love that sort of stuff. And then you fit in everything around it. So it depends really, because recently I've been dabbling with a little bit of cycling, so my training load has gone all over the place, and subsequently my realization that you can't lift 3 times a week if you've done 120k at the weekend.
No.
It just doesn't work like that, and obviously we'll learn the hard way. So I think my training week is split up over 6 days. On some days I will actually do a double session, purely because I have dedicated the time to, and I have the time to, and I have a diary that constitutes that. But it might be, so Monday would be like a recovery session, with maybe some upper body accessories, lots of stability work, some carries. Tuesday will be a main lifting day. It might be a trap bar deadlift, with some other kind of hip stuff. Although the trap bar is probably knee based. Wednesday will be a long cardio day, because I love that. I love just switching off and 60-75 minutes of either zone 3, zone 2, or just hammer down for 40 minutes. But that's depending on how I feel. It's quite reactive. Thursday's an out and out hinge day. So that might be whatever the kind of goal of that session is. And Friday is sleeve muscles, all that sort of stuff.
Always. I'll tell you what.
Friday.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's really good about that as well is the way you said, you prioritize your week around, again, you make sure if you want to do a double session, you make sure you have the time for that. And I just want to kind of go back to the way you mentioned earlier, your training age. You're talking about 12, 15 years of knowing your body, knowing how hard you can push. And it's the problem when obviously you put your stuff out on social media and people say, oh shit, like you're training too much. It's like, no, I know how hard I can push. I know how hard I can push as often as I can push. And people then think, you know what, I'm going to now do some double days and stuff like that. But they don't have your lifestyle. They don't have your diary. They don't have your recovery and how your dedication to eating well, recovering well, taking the time for some, self-work and the fact you work from home, essentially, that's also a whole luxury, and everything you need is there. Where some people are like, they're trying to do it before they go into the office, so they do that session and then they do the evening session. They wonder why they're fucked after a couple of weeks, because you're gonna burn out, because they're thinking that what you do is the way to do it, because they obviously respect how you're putting things out, but then they don't realize is everything that you've put in to get to the stage that you're at, to be able to do that as often as you do. And as you say, you probably don't actually train as much as people think you do. You just train smart, you train hard.
Yeah, and most of my lifting sessions will be in and out in 40 minutes. And then and I use other time to lunge, carry, drag, push, because that for me is a real tool for longevity. And I think we're in good company when I say that, but I think it's often misunderstood. Like you can train more if you train correctly. Like if you train incorrectly, you will train less, because you'll be unrecovered, you'll be underprepared, and you won't be utilizing your system at all, and you'll be relying on physios and massages and everything like that. But when it comes to mobility and like suppleness and pliability, like lower body mobility is sorted in a sled push or a lunge. That's the driver. You don't have to spend hours and hours doing pails and rails, or hours and hours doing ROMWOD. You can get it. You can train the hip to rotate in the frontal plane. You can, in the transverse, or whatever. You know what I mean.
And just on that, and it was just making me think as well about like the discipline side stuff. And so when it comes to alcohol consumption, right? Because from what I've never known you to be half the one that I've seen on social that apparently likes a drink. But I remember you putting out a post a little while back and saying how you basically like stop drinking and focus on productivity, really growing your brand and stuff like that. Obviously, that takes out booze in general takes such a hit on your training and being able to constantly train and not get injured and so forth. I blame part of my back injury from having 2 weekends on the lash back to back. It's like I wonder why I get injured. I'm not fucking 22 anymore, so that's why I can't handle that. So have you
that's the
found?
thing.
Have you found that? What do you now do when it comes to drinking? Do you not drink now? It's like I was just curious about.
Interesting. So I think the, 1 a week warrior, as it were, was the sport psychology. And that's, that used to happen on a Wednesday night or a Saturday. And, when I moved to London and, times are relatively, stress free in terms of I had a good job. I had a very busy client base. I'd like to go on a Saturday night and have a good time, but it flipped when I knew what I wanted to do.
Nice.
The roles I was in did not let me bring out the best in myself. I always wanted more. I always wanted that clinical side. So, I left my first job at Third Space. I got a job working in a clinic. So you'd imagine a personal trainer, a strength coach, working in a clinic with a massage bed and about maybe not even 2 meters of space, and that was at the time where I was investing in courses and I was doing CPD with institutes like Fortius and making invaluable inroads. And I thought at this stage, the movement blueprint still wasn't evolved just yet. And I thought, this is a chance for me to. Everyone wants to bridge the gap, but this is a chance for me to actually put foundations down. I even called myself the corrective exercise specialist on Instagram. I had a website. I was writing blogs for everyone I could to get my point across, to get my view across, to be exposed to clinical practitioners, and I think when it started to fall into place and I got more opportunities to speak in front of people, more opportunities to learn and go to these CPD things and not have a clue what these guys were talking about, I thought, right, now we've got to turn the dial. Now we've got to understand what's got to change. And for me, that 1 a week warrior was definitely a phase and it definitely a continuation through university. But when shit got real, like I know that the work had to be done. And that's when, 2-3 years ago, everything changed and it wasn't a priority to me. The priority had completely changed. The priority was now to create a business and platform that, like, I wasn't after being respected, or I wasn't after looking for people to say, oh, the movement blueprint's great. I wanted to do myself justice and to do what I had in my head justice. And I think that is the daily driver. That is the, up until right now today, myself and my partner, continuing pushing forward on all aspects of the business. And yeah, alcohol, I've got friends that like lean on drink and they think you have to drink to have a good time. And that's just not me. That's really not me. Yes, I'm all for having a great time. And yes, I've had a couple of drinks and I do enjoy that, but the priority is just completely switched. The next year, 2 years are going to be absolutely huge. And I think the being present and giving my best every day is just such an important thing to me.
Great answer, mate.
There you go. I think we've alluded to and touched on it a little bit so far in the episode, but I wanted to just pull at some threads in terms of this change of perspective that you've talked about and how your priorities have changed, but also your approach to the rehab process and how you've switched to a much more towards the training side of the spectrum. It's something that really resonates with me as well. Could you talk us through how you had these moments of realization that sort of classic rehab exercises weren't enough and how you've now moved your practice to be much more towards hard training, essentially, which I think everybody actually appreciates and enjoys?
100%. So I got really tired of doing favors off the side of a bench. I was all into it's never passive, but more passive realms of assessments. I was all into following the script, ticking boxes, and I was seeing people to paint a bit of a picture. I worked split shifts in a clinic in the city, in a physio clinic, and I had 4 hours in the morning of half-an-hour appointments. And then I had 4 hours over lunch, which I actually went back down the Northern Line to Clapham to coach either classes or clients training. Then I went in the evening to do more base work. So, I was doing about 50 or so client facing hours per week for about 2 years. And it was a big learning tool. These were half an hour appointments where you got a tiny bit of exposure to what this person is doing right there, right now. And to solve the problem for that person, I needed a completely different narrative. I didn't need to understand what their hip did passively or how they were in internal rotation when I was putting them in, have they got 30 degrees of internal rotation. I needed to see if that lunge was a pelvic lunge or that lunge was a lunge. So I needed to see if I put them into a split squat, if they have adequate hip internal rotation, you'll be able to see that. If they don't, then you'll be able to see that pelvic lateral shift. I knew that you can solve problems by looking globally. If we can coach people to just organize their trunk, people chat like rib cage pelvis all the time now, but essentially, if you set a good platform, okay, and you have a knee injury, problems will solve themselves. And that may be more awareness into loading the lats, more awareness into utilizing movements that require pelvic stability, lunges, locomotor patterns, crawling, all that sort of stuff. And I needed more than a massage bed than that to do that. And there's only so many isometrics you can give before, you do 3 sets of isometrics and the stimulus goes. Past 15 seconds, there's not much value in an isometric, if I'm honest. So I needed to get people loading. I needed to get people understanding, what was actually going on. And in a CPD, I remember it as clear as day. I did a CPD thing on knee injuries. What was it? Probably 4 or 5 years ago. 2 physios in clinic, and I did a Poliquin step down, and I said we should be loading this at 50% plus body weight, and everyone went nope, and I went yep. I said we are resilient. We are resilient people. Like, humans are very resilient. Joints and muscles are very resilient. We have just, through habitual changes, created really badly functioning humans. Now, we can unpick that through adequate stimulus and targeted stimulus and good movement selection, exercise prescription, and make better humans. So that was the driver behind that. And I went the full process of doing it the long way and, solving a squat by doing pals and rails at the ankle for 15 minutes and then isometrics at the hip for 15 minutes. Whereas I actually could solve a squat by lunging. Yeah, and relying on that positive transfer.
Ash is like, yes.
Yeah, but I think you have to go through that process, and you have to understand, like, being wrong to grow. And I think I was wrong a lot of the time, and I was wrong with shoulder injuries. I was wrong with Achilles rehab. I was wrong with knee rehab. I was wrong with my own knee rehab. And those points, I remember them really well. And those points shaped me. And I think that, now I'm at the stage where, as a coach, you're either a coach who talks or a coach who listens. And I think I've been the coach who talks. And I've done that. And I'm now now I can see situations and I listen to the coaches I educate and the people I chat to, and it's the ability to stand back from a situation and understand what this person is presenting in front of you, be it in conversation, be it in a movement screen. There's so many layers to this game, and we need to understand when to unpick certain things and when to dive in. And I think that's the balance.
So much music to my ears there, mate. I really applaud the way you've phrased all of that, because I couldn't agree with it more. I think it's perfectly in alignment with the way we think about things at the training stimulus as well, in terms of, we call it the spectrum of specificity. Like, if you can fix a squat with a squat or something that's very similar to a squat, you shouldn't need to isolate out your big toe joint unless it's really necessary to get the stimulus to fix whatever's going on. And the closer you stay to the squat, the more similar it is to training, so you don't feel like you're in rehab. We always say it's all training. Whatever you're doing, you're trying to get your body to function better, whether that is something quite abstract from a normal training exercise or not. It's still a training process, and keeping that psychology is so important for getting somebody back to where they wanted to be. And I wanted to dig deeper into the knee stuff, because I think you've had like a lot of knee injuries, and you said just there where you felt like you were doing it wrong compared to how you're doing it now. Could you go into a little bit more detail on that for the listeners, please? Like, how are you getting it wrong? What changed, and how are you doing it better now?
So I think in terms of getting it wrong, I wasn't aggressive enough. And you can tiptoe through rehab, or you can provide effective rehab solutions. And as you said just then, an effective rehab solution is a training stimulus. Like it is a training session. It is a global ethos behind building strength. Be that through subsystems or be that through isolation. And I think that I wasn't utilizing stability-driven movements to create a stimulus, and I wasn't, on the flip side, utilizing locomotive patterns to create a global stimulus. And I think that was purely because the education I had up until then was clinic centric, so it was kind of parking braked. The whole process of injury management has so many variables into it, but if you're in the right setting, then those variables within reason in the musculoskeletal world, not post surgery or post ACLR, where there's certain formalities that have to be met, you can challenge them just from a nervous system point of view, from a readiness point of view. And I think that when I did realize that you can be more aggressive, it changed the narrative. I'll challenge that just then with the whole more recent process of this full ankle and full knee bend idolization that people have. And if we just break that down in terms of a knee injury, people are seeing knees over toe guy and Marcus Philly adopt this full knee bend, full ankle bend for function. Like, function is not exercise rehab. The requirements of that pattern, so full knee bend, full ankle bend, anterior displacement of the tibia, requires pronation, disassociation through the calcaneus. It provides a stable platform. It requires tibial rotation. It requires full accessibility into hip rotation capacities as well. But that's a lot for people to have. And if someone's injured in the first place, it's more than likely the nervous system has put a massive blocker on, one, that range of motion, two, the anxiety over that range of motion, and three, what actually happens in that range of motion. If you have an unstable knee, Rob, you mentioned your client with the MCL. If you have an unstable knee, or you have the medial aspect of your knee, is the awareness, your nervous system is heightened to that medial compartment of the knee, then you don't want to be challenging the knee joint in end range flexion. So I think the process of knee rehab coaches need to be more aware of what's actually going on with the knee joint, the functional anatomy of the knee. MCL, you've got pes anserinus. Okay, so you've got that like medial compartment and anchor of the adductors and the hamstrings. Okay, those systems are going to support the knee. Yeah, you may have a defect in the MCL, you may have a defect in the medial cartilage, but you can still load those systems. You can still do it maybe to a 90-degree angle, where there's relative safety within the knee joint itself, but you can still get good contractile force through the adductor systems, through the hamstrings. You can then do, adopt positional isometrics in split squat, whatever you want. But I think the intent needs to be that we need to be a little bit smarter and not just idolize what's happening in the industry. As in, everyone go full knee bend, everyone go front to elevated split squat, everyone start lifting your heel off and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think that correlates really well with the episode we just did on squatting and how squat depth gets glamorized as well as something that everyone should strive towards. And I think you're asking the right question there as to where are you currently and where do you need to get to, rather than this arbitrary standard of full ankle bend, full knee bend, just because these amazing athletes on Instagram are doing it, and we're not all gonna get there. And maybe moving a step in that direction would benefit us, but maybe it's just one step and not all the way, because they've invested huge amounts of time to get there as part of a marketing tool, which I think is important to realize. That Ben Patrick freely admits is like, I do crazy shit because it draws attention to my page and people think, oh, this guy doing all this crazy shit trains like this, so I should train like that because I want to be more like him. When actually, if you know where you're trying to get to, then you just need, like, good enough is good enough. So enough ankle range, enough knee range, enough like tissue tolerance to do what you want to do is enough. You don't need to keep going to this like extreme arbitrary standard. And I think that's a really nice way of summing it up. For the listeners, there's a lot of technical stuff in there. If we could distill down the principles of the knee rehab, how could our listeners get clear on what their knee issue is and map out the initial steps to start addressing it?
100%. So the first phase of any rehab process is stability driven. So we need to create stability and create a stimulus where there is high either external stability or there's control or autonomy over the joint. So, utilizing isometrics, utilizing shorter range of motion, tempos, and all that sort of stuff. And I think that there lays the question, is that if your knee is angry, then it needs to be a good knee. And when I say an angry knee, I mean swelling. You can't strengthen edema. Like a joint with swelling is not a joint worth loading. So there are multiple principles that go into a knee injury rehab process. And I think that, let's say where most of the listeners will be with knee injuries, this is quite an overriding comment, but if people have knee overload, due to a muscular weakness or a structural weakness, be it from a mobility deficit or a strength deficit, and they want to get back running, for example, what do they have to do to manage that? So let's say initial phase, let's reestablish stability and autonomy over the joint. So let's make sure we have structural strength. Let's make sure we have, adequate stability within a controlled range of motion. Next phase, let's restore locomotion. Let's restore controlled knee bend, knee extend. Let's control co-contractions from the calf, hamstring. So everything has stability through movement. And once we're there through any exercise we choose, we can move on to kind of return to play. And this is where people go wrong. If people want to get back running, there needs to be a plyometric exposure. So there needs to be a low level driven plyometric exposure. This could be, ACL reconstruction says that you need 10 to 12 sets per week, of loaded low grade plyometrics. But again, it's all dependent on the person. So progressively exposing yourself to plyometrics will allow you to run. Just doing single leg extensions, single leg press, step downs, gym based stuff, working at tempos is great, but it's not going to prepare you for 9 times transient body weight through your soleus. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you give us some examples just to bring that to life of like what would the lowest grade plyometrics you use through to like just pre-running? What's that spectrum look like?
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm glad you said, like, we have I coach like a continuum, as it were. So first port of call is landing, and that might be toe to heel landing. So drop jumps. You can glamorize drop jumps through double foot. You can glamorize it through single leg. You can glamorize it through rotation. Second stimulus might be, pogos, but pogos in like a knee bend, posterior tilt. So we have an organization through trunk. We have anterior orientation of the knee. So we have load going through the front of the knee. We have controlled ankle bend, but ankle stiffness is kind of the real driver there. And this might be 3 sets of 15 for quality, 3 sets of 20 for quality in week 2. Moving on to maybe, sets of hops into week 3, for instance.
Brilliant.
and then graded exposure into return to running. Just needs to lean itself towards specificity, and you can integrate that with the person. If you train a marathon runner, their specificity is going to be completely different, and their plyometric spectrum is going to be completely different as if you were training a sprinter, or if you were training a normal person. Not either of the two. Just a normal person that likes to go out and run 10K pain-free, there needs to be graded exposure to where that person is and what they present right there and then.
Brilliant. I think that's a really important point, that everything can be scaled up or down, and it's just finding that start point of what are you ready for now and where do you want to get to, and putting in the requisite stepping stones to make that transition smooth. Because like you say, in the return to play part is where everybody gets it wrong, because they think that because they're done with classic rehab, that means they're ready to go run that marathon, and actually there's 100 potential steps you could put in to smooth that transition from out of clinic and onto the roads. So I really like the way you say that.
When it comes to the coaching side of things as well, I think it's as you say, like, how you have your continuum, and I think how it's so important that the injured individual also respects the fact that they have to go through this journey. I think a big issue is when you are injured and you have this perception of what you can do, and then how far back you've had to say essentially regress to down that continuum and then you think I'm much better than this, and you got to realize it's not that you're now a less of a person, but you just have to make sure you've mastered these mechanics, because basically you've gone back to square one. And even if you're not at square one, you'll get to step 5, say, a lot quicker because you are ready. And I think it's such an easy thing to do. And then I say, once you're pain free, to then be thinking, right, I've got to get out running now and crack back on. You're like, as you say, you've missed out a portion of your return to play exercise. So it's so important. And one thing that I kind of wanted to ask then, where you mentioned obviously about when there's the inflammation on the joint and stuff, and you obviously don't want to necessarily be doing loads of squatting to promote more inflammation. Doing exercises that are lower body dominant, that don't necessarily strain that knee, is that a good thing to be doing? So for instance, something that I would, if that was my client, for instance, what I would be thinking about prescribing for her is doing some, say, elevated kettlebell deadlifts, for instance, getting that posterior loaded, making sure that lower body, there is some knee flexion of something, so the knee's bending. So you're going to obviously start promoting growth to the area, starting promoting the body to say, like, we need to heal this area some more. Is that something that you agree with, or am I just completely butchering that?
No, 100%. But I think it needs to be driven towards global stimulus. So I think it needs to be B stance. I think it needs to be loaded ipsilaterally if it's an MCL. I think there needs to be challenging, varying vectors of forces and varying stimulus for that client to learn from. Mm-hmm. But I think in terms of a knee rehab process, we have a module on it in our education system that is basically objective data points. So what can we expect as a coach from that person at that time? And if it's knee driven, it might be strength test with high stability. So single leg press, 10 RM. What percentage of body weight can that person shift? That is objective data that we know that the knee joint will perform. Flip that on its head. How will that knee, what objective data can we expect from a jump test? Not everyone has jump mats or my jump app or anything like that, but are there variables and are there subjective information, like data points that we can drive from learning and seeing people jump? If we record, all we have to do as a coach, we don't need jump mats, we don't need occlusion cuffs, we don't need all this sort of stuff. We just need an eye. We just need some film and an eye, and it might be that we just film the person varying levels of the continuum. So we film a person lunging towards us, we film a person walking away from us, we film a person hopping or striding, bounding, and then we understand what's going on at ground impact, what's going on through the rest of the chain, and how that can be built, and then we can prescribe from there. But I think coaching has layers, and it can either be generic or it can either be detail driven. And I think like the more detail driven you can be, but the more simple you can make it, that's an effective solution for injury rehab.
Yeah, that's a really nice articulation of it. I think the principle of all of this, and the reason why we say it's all training, is that the way the body gets better is progressive overload. And when you're lifting, it's very simple because it's sets times reps times weight, and that's very easy to track. But when we get into the rehab space, and like you say there, it's a lot more qualitative rather than quantitative. It is harder to get that objective data. So having just a framework in place that allows you to measure the progression against the KPI that you care about. So if it's knee health, and like you said with that leg press example, how well is that knee actually performing? We need to check in to see that it is improving, that it is getting better. And whether it's performance in an exercise or the quality of control in a movement through video, we have to have those reference points. Otherwise, we're just guessing that they're getting better. Like, you wouldn't just go and squat 4x8 without any awareness of the weight on the bar or the tempo and expect to get stronger. And it should be the same for correctives as well. So I really like the way you said that. We'll get that in the sound bites for you. Awesome, mate. We're up on the hour, so give us an update just before you go on what's next for the Movement Blueprint. You alluded to your education system, and tell us more about that, please.
So the education system is essentially it's for coaches who are experienced personal trainers but want to dive deeper within certain protocols. So everything from mobility training, corrective driven training, movement optimization, and kind of going down that scale. But the big overriding thing is I've created it as to what I needed. I really needed it, and the content in the course and the coaches and the physios we've had on it have been, the feedback's been really positive in the sense that it is training optimized. Like, it's training driven, because people need to train. Like, the whole train out of pain thing is such a huge thing. Corrective exercise has been given a label, but it's only now that label is being ripped back and thinking, a deadlift is corrective exercise. A carry is probably one of the most corrective exercises you can do. These sort of things that underpin, the things we know, the things we've got into habits with our clients. I think it's very easy for coaches to roll through with the intent of getting a busy diary, but really put on the back burner, their education, their learning. And, some of the courses out there are great, but, is it all reactive, or is it kind of like older news that's been assessed and yes, optimized, and yes, you have to learn this, now let's teach it to everyone. Whereas, some clients train runners, so they need to understand what runners do, or some coaches train runners. And the education course is designed to be reactive. It's constantly evolving. And I'm just excited for the next year. MVP, we are, well, I won't put a massive spoiler out, but we got lots planned. And myself, I'm incredibly fortunate to own the business with my fiance. And she is, as a professional, incredible. Her career has been incredibly impressive, and we've come together at a really good time. And the plan is to just keep that right foot nice and heavy.
Nice.
Awesome, mate. And where can people find out more about it? Give us your links.
Yes, so you can find us online at www.themovementblueprint.co. You can find us on Instagram at The Movement Blueprint. And more about me is Harvey Lawton on Instagram. Gents, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for coming
on,
mate.
Appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, it's been great.
Really enjoyed that one.
Thank you, Harvey, for coming on. Really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed that episode, and hearing kind of where you come from and where you plan on taking the movement blueprint, and helping everyone train for longer. I think that's something that we all want to do. So, as always, guys, if you did enjoy that episode, please do share it on all the usual social platforms and stuff to try and spread the message. If you want to support the podcast, head over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search for Lunge and Lift. You'll probably find us somewhere. And as always, if you did enjoy the episode and you'd love to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, leave us a cheeky 5 stars and say what you enjoyed about the podcast. So, as always, thank you very much for giving us your time, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.